Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. Hope everyone's having a beautiful day. Hope the sun is shining. Hope the birds are singing. Hope the wind is at your back. Fade in. The desert is quiet. Too quiet. Not because there's no one there, but because the algorithm stopped rendering sound after the last Divine Influx update. And standing at the edge of this synthetic silence is Adam Miezio, the last copy-slinger in a media frontier where the sacred wears a poncho and the profane reloads Google ads. But Adam isn't here for shootouts. He's here to translate the ineffable into italics. Miezio's Substack isn't a newsletter. It's a most wanted poster for runaway ideas. Dispatches like Psychedelic Science 2025, geared for weird. Does 20th century science fit 21st century consciousness? A different kind of frequent flyer mile. These aren't articles. They're smoke signals from the frontier where analytics accidentally swallowed the Upanishads. Adam walks through this desert with a data set in one holster and a sutra in the other, always asking the one question no campaign strategist dares to utter: can a molecule remain sacred once it's been A/B tested? He's not here to scale, he's not here to pitch, he's here to decode the karmic residue baked into your conversion rates. Adam, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Oh, it's awesome to be here again, George. Thank you very much for having me. And very cool intro, man. Very cool intro. This is feeling like a top-notch operation.
Man, I am stoked you're here, man. It's been a while since we hung out at Psychedelic Science, and the air is kind of clearing. I'm kind of decompressing, man. What have you been up to over there?
Decompressing as well. Had a lot to dig out from under after psychedelic science, but now pretty much back to baseline. Spent some time decompressing. I stayed in Denver for about another week or so after the conference. Spent some time with family, but now back here down in Mexico in Oaxaca. So yeah, back at it again.
Nice. You've also been gearing up for Global Psychedelics Week, man. Maybe you could tell the people like what that's about, what's going on there.
Sure. Global Psychedelic Week is a global online event that I'm working with, created and founded by Lisa Mandich and Dennis Walker. And it's November 3rd through the 9th. And there are over 100 speakers from 100 countries around the world. If you go to globalpsychedelicweek.com, I believe you can find a list of the speakers. And we're still rostering people, getting people signed up to speak. So come back and look for updates. And for now, until the event, I have been doing the blog and doing interviews with people who work in or are part of the psychedelic community around the world, doing interviews with them and putting them up on the blog. So an interesting place to find some cool content.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be an epic event with like a lot of cool people that are. It's going to be a huge event too. There's people worldwide. Like, how many? You got a few hundred. Do you have a few hundred speakers there, or how many people you got going to do that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the number is up to right now, but it is over 100 speakers. So that's really cool, and from over 100 countries around the world. So it's definitely going to be a large event. And then we're also planning on having local activations and having people do local in-person real world events in sync with the online event.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like the next level. It's almost like the second half of maps.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, we need more ways for people to connect, to gather, to hang out, to get to know each other, and to build community. So this will be a fantastic opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting to get to see all the people there and then have these other events. But you know what I wanted to get into today, man, is sort of the weird, the strange, the incredible, the mind of Adam Miezio, man. I've been checking out the Substack over there, and dude, you got a lot of great articles on there. Any one of them top of your mind right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just put out a fun one last night. I've been thinking about for some months about a talking psychedelic octopus DJ on MDMA. And I think to the average, Joe, that's going to sound pretty wacko and crazy, and maybe get me an invite to a white padded cell. But it's actually not that. It's not sheer lunacy. A lot of the pieces are already in place. Not that anybody's actually working on this happening, but it could happen. And that's one of the points I made in the Substack, is that we're at a point now where there's going to be a lot of weird stuff happening, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, with the collision of our the velocity of our technological progress and what AI is going to become capable of. And that's one of the points that I made in the article, is that Ava Raskin, I'm not a tech bro. I'm not a fan of tech bros, but he appears to be a pretty big tech bro, and is using a program called, I think it's Nature LM, to try and decode animal communication using AI. So, talking with animals and maybe an octopus, it's not, it's like a Black Mirror episode, basically. It's a future near possibility now.
Yeah, when I was reading that article, something really struck to me. Like the way the octopus communicates is through, it creates, what is it, like texture and then movement and shape, like in many different ways, right?
Texture, shape, and color.
Yes, yes. On some level, Adam,
It's like psychedelic braille or something,
psychedelic braille. It got me thinking, on some level, just knowing that changes the way I think about communication, because humans do it too. Like if you really look at somebody, like if they're all tightened up, they'll cross their arms, so they kind of change their shape. If you embarrass somebody, they change their color, or sometimes reading like the right words or saying the right things, like they get goosebumps. On some level, we have those things. We just don't really tune into them too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's a favorite topic of mine to talk about a lot. That's a really good point. Because something, what is it, like 85 or 90% of all human communication is nonverbal. And it's subconscious. We don't actually think about what our bodies are doing while we're speaking. And, kind of like the body keeps the score. The body doesn't lie. So, I've read, that's actually what I studied in college, was communication. And then I took a couple of courses about nonverbal communication. And there's so many tells. It's like poker, when people have tells. But there's only been a few, because there are so many of them. There's only a few that I can always remember. One is which direction a person's feet are pointing. If there's a group of people and somebody's talking, always look at that person's feet, because supposedly the direction their feet are pointing in, if they're pointing at a person, that's the person they're most interested in, even if they're not like speaking directly towards them or even speaking with them.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I know I talked to some body language experts, and they were always talking about, if someone looks up and to the right, they're thinking about something that is, they're imagining something. Up and to the left means like they're trying to think of something to say because they don't want to talk to you. I forgot exactly what it was, but there's so much communication that does happen non-verbally like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just tons and tons. Like, just with the face alone, then you can get into the arms and then the feet.
Yeah.
And it's endless. It's very interesting stuff, though. So, yeah, like the octopus, I was thinking for a minute that, for an octopus to communicate, it could potentially learn sign language, maybe, because each tentacle kind of sort of has its own brain and acts independently of the other tentacles. But then there's this idea of plugging it, collecting the data, the physiological data, the color, the shape, the texture, and feeding that into AI to try and decode a language maybe that an octopus would speak. But then the third option is this, the wildest and the most fun idea of, some kind of interdimensional or galactic intelligence that's been existing for God knows, how long, millennia, eternity. And that, maybe it has this, ability to speak or communicate, create language in it already, and it's just waiting to be manifested or actualized.
I think it's plausible. Like, we on some level think that we are like the masters of communication, but we're like the last ones to catch up. I mean, in some of these psychedelic states, it feels like, you're communicating with the world. Like you can talk to the trees, you can understand the ecosystems. Maybe we're like the last ones to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating idea, because I forgot, there was a previous Substack I wrote about the octopus in general, just the anatomy and physiology and some of the weird facts about it. and I forgot how many hundreds or millions of years ago, we shared a common ancestor with the octopus. So we came from the same point at one time, and now one of us can speak and the other doesn't. And yet an octopus is extremely intelligent, has already been declared sentient by the
Yeah.
UK. So yeah, it begs the question, yeah, maybe, well, one of the things is discussed is they're telepathic possibly.
Yeah.
And that would be an advanced form of communication that we would be unaware of. Here we're thinking we're the most advanced because we can talk, but if we don't, if we're not clued into our telepathic abilities, then we're going to be clueless that an octopus can already talk.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the article you put out about the music promotes mushroom growth. And the question
Yeah.
that came to mind was like, what if the mycelial network is a sentient intergalactic neural web orchestrating planetary consciousness? Like, like why not?
Yeah, I mean that's something I've toyed with a lot lately, and I've said a lot is the mushrooms, the plant medicine, the psychedelics are conscious. That's something I don't believe or disbelieve. I just kind of hold it,
Yeah.
in suspended in a suspended state between the two now. I think that's very possible, especially because mushrooms are neither plant nor animal; they're both. So there's a good possibility that they could become conscious too, if not already. So and mushrooms, geez, they got to probably be at least as old as octopuses or vice versa. So you're going way, way, way back in history and the evolutionary timeline with both of those.
Yeah. It seems, I don't know, on some level it seems to me like the mycelium is like a neural network. Like if you just look at the way it's structured, the way it grows, it kind of seems like synaptic activity happening right there. And then you eat it and you kind of get in tune with it. It's like the flesh of God on some level.
Well, yeah, and here's the strange thing: there's a similarity with that to the octopus, because
Okay.
the strange thing that I mentioned about the interdimensional galactic intelligence with octopuses is something that's been theorized based on the entity encounters that people have, because one of the most common entity encounters is the octopus. And that was discussed, I pointed out in David J. Brown's new book about his field guide to DMT entities, is the octopus is one that everybody sees. But there's a problem with this, because as I wrote in my Substack, say you have some Bedouin in the Sahara who does DMT and he sees a freaking octopus, like how? The dude's
Yeah,
never
right.
seen an octopus in his life, much less even knows what one looks like to be able to describe it. And yet these people that have no, there's no locality to that experience because they live where there are no octopuses. How are they able to do that? How are they able to perfectly describe or draw an octopus coming out of a DMT journey? It's very fascinating, and that's something that Andrew Gallimore has been talking about lately with DMT studies and DMTX, is that there's a big difference between certain psychedelics and plant medicines. For example, with mushrooms, we know that form constants, these kind of geometric patterns that everybody sees, fractals and mandalas and stuff like that, they're formed in the visual cortex. I believe it was the German scientist Heinrich Kleiber knew that some decades ago, like in the 50s or 60s. And there's a difference with DMT, because these visions of, say, an octopus entity aren't coming from the visual cortex. We don't know where they're coming from. So this is a big mystery and makes it very interesting. Like, yeah, maybe like the mycelium, the octopus is just some intergalactic cosmic intelligence from another dimension that's found a way to imprint itself in, outside the bookends of consciousness. Maybe it just doesn't live in the water. Like how does, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that is wild to think about, that somebody could live in an area where an octopus doesn't exist. They do DMT, they come back and they're like, no, here, man, I saw this octopus like that. That makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, you brought up too the idea of like maybe they're interdimensional. Maybe they've been here so long that their conscious is interdimensional. It's kind of a trip to
Well,
think about.
well, yeah, exactly. That's something that I referenced, that Terence McKenna talked about. This the intergalactic or galactic intelligence that survived 150,000 civilizations. How long has an octopus been around? And that was, I think, another thing that McKenna talked about, that maybe mushrooms came from space because their spores can survive in space. Who knows? Maybe in one of those spores there was like an octopus, egg. Who knows where an octopus came from?
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, and there's other links to this idea of intergalactic intelligence or beings or entities with the octopus. And it was something I referenced in my Substack as H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, that guy.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend not doing psychedelics and then reading Call of Cthulhu or reading really anything by H.P. Lovecraft, because that guy, he's terrifying. Those books are great. They're really fun. But that's when, octopus studies, go wrong. It's almost like altered states of float tanks. Yeah, if you want to not ever want to see an octopus entity on DMT, go read H.P. Lovecraft.
Let me bring in the great Robert Sean Davis. Robert Sean Davis, you're an amazing human. Thank you for all the support.
Yeah, Robert.
He says, we also have no empirical knowledge of the impact the octopus may already have on the formation and sustainability of our current consciousness that we take for granted. We have very little shared awareness on the symbiotic nature that makes up our collective basis. It's a great point.
Yeah, and who knows? It's kind of interesting to think about. I was just listening to a podcast last night about this interesting relationship between predator and prey. Who knows? Maybe when we split from our common, evolutionary point with the octopus, maybe for a little while the octopus was our predator. Who knows? Maybe we're just a soft little glob of meat floating in an ocean somewhere, and an octopus fed on us. And then that just imprinted us with some weird, deep, cosmic, psychic relationship with the octopus. And now it's the other way around, and we're eating octopus.
Well, even if you go back to old maps, like you go look at like an old map from a cartographer, like in the 1400s, there's always like a picture of a ship with like a giant octopus, like pulling it down, or there's all this stuff in the mythology.
Yeah, I mean, it goes way, way back. I mean, this has been a fascination that mankind has had with the octopus for a long time. A lot of Japanese artwork too. There's that one Japanese artist who depicted, like giant squid and giant octopuses and stuff like that. So yeah, this is something very deep and integral to our, collective unconscious, subconscious, psyche, something. And it's really, really fascinating. Because it is one of the most fascinating creatures on the planet and one of the most intelligent ones. And at the same time, one of the most vulnerable ones, because it doesn't have a shell, exoskeleton, nothing. It's just soft meat ready and waiting to be eaten by just about everything out in the sea.
So would you listen? Oh, I believe there was a time when you turned into an octopus. Maybe you could share that story.
Yeah, that was an interesting evening. I was doing an ayahuasca retreat in Texas outside of Austin. And I had an odd night of ceremony. It was kind of, I guess a good word to use was spectral. It was just kind of eerie, had some unusual experiences and visions. Then, afterwards, come down to baseline reality. And I'm talking to my neighbor in the ceremony circle. And he was just looking at me. How did I describe him? Oh, I was saying his eyes wobbled between ascension and asylum. And he's like, dude, you turned into this octopus. And he just went on for like 5 minutes about how I turned into an octopus and what I looked like and what was happening. I just stood there and I didn't say a word. I just like glued to this guy and listening to every word he said. I was like, wow, that's wild. So yeah, these, I mean, I experienced it firsthand, well, maybe secondhand, I guess you could say, the commonality of these types of experiences. I've never had any kind of underwater or octopus experience on any kind of plant medicine or psychedelics, but obviously other people do, to the point that, they turn and look at you in the middle of the night and then all of a sudden you're not you anymore. You're some kind of interdimensional, octopus with galactic intelligence, it's certainly fascinating.
Have you ever known anybody that has had like a psychedelic trip underwater, like a scuba diver that's taken like a giant dose? I know it's probably not the safest thing, and I'm not saying people should do it, but that would be an interesting journey.
I think years ago somebody may have told me that because I did for a couple of years scuba dive, and that would be, yeah. Don't do this at home type of thing. Don't ever do this period, but that would be really cool. I mean, it's very psychedelic
Yeah,
underwater when you
yeah,
scuba dive, especially when you first learn how to be neutrally buoyant and kind of quote unquote float underwater. Then you're able to just relax and breathe and then just see what is going on underwater. And it's just absolutely mind manifesting it because it's a whole different world down there. And the creatures are just so weird and strange and different than what we're used to up here on ground and terra firma. So yeah, I couldn't even imagine that, like psychedelics and scuba diving.
yeah. There was a while back when I was staying in Hawaii. My daughter and I would go snorkeling like every Saturday morning, and we'd always go to this one beach called Three Tables. And one day I was out there, and it was just me and my daughter, and like I was swimming. And for those who want to go to a great snorkeling place, Three Tables is awesome. Like there's this giant canyon that kind of moves through these two giant rocks. And I was out there snorkeling, and I looked at my daughter. She was kind of far off, and then I dove down, Adam, into like this canyon. And as I'm diving down, I held my breath, and I look over to my right hand side, and like I see a woman in a white dress, clear as day. I'm like, holy shit, what is this? And like this woman is swimming up from the canyon in a complete white dress, swimming up. And then I look over, and there's a dude in like a tuxedo, and I'm like, dude, am I tripping my balls off right now? And like I swam to the surface because I was kind of scared, and I was like, oh my god, did I just see that? And then they both pop up, and there's a wedding photographer right there taking a picture of them. So they had come into the water while I was out there, but I didn't know that. It was like the most psychedelic thing I'd ever seen in my life because I'm like, dude, there's a woman in a white dress swimming up from the bottom. Like, how did you get there? But that's the closest thing I can think of to doing psychedelics underwater, man. It was mind manifesting.
I wonder, there's a couple I follow online on social media from Florida, and they do underwater photography. I wonder if it was them. They've been doing it for many years. I don't know how they do it because they do go down, like
Yeah.
the wife goes down underwater in these
Yep.
exquisite, elegant dresses. And then
Yeah.
we'll stand on top of shipwrecks and in like next to coral reefs and all kinds of stuff. And they take these amazing pictures. They even take pictures by alligators underwater in Florida. I don't even know how they do it. It's amazing photography. And I know it's real because they've been doing
Yeah.
it for years before the advent of AI.
Yeah. It's so mind blowing just to see that aspect of it. But I guess that kind of brings us up to like the Sarpa Salpa, man. Maybe you could fill people in on what that is.
Oh, yeah. The psychedelic sea bream. Yeah, I wrote a Substack about that a while ago. That's been around for a long time, going back to at least the Romans, probably before the Romans. I would imagine the Phoenicians or somebody knew about them. And yeah, the sea bream is a very common fish. Well, it used to be more common in the Mediterranean, virtually everywhere in the Mediterranean until it got overfished because it was a common food source for everybody living around there. And yeah, the Romans, I think, figured out that it was psychedelic. And so there's been a long history of psychedelic usage of this, the Sarpa Selpa, or Selpa Sarpa, however that goes. I forgot which order it's in. And especially in recent years, some people doing getting actually unintentionally dosed by eating psychedelic sea bream. So yeah, that's an interesting little phenomenon. So be careful what you eat coming out of the Mediterranean.
What is it like is it like psilocybin, or what are the accounts like? Is it more
No,
LSD
it's just
like, or
a naturally occurring chemical that the fish produces. I'm not sure actually what it is in the end, or what chemical exactly, but this makes a perfect segue for people to check out adammiezio.substack.com, and you can read about it in my Substack there.
yeah, without a
But
doubt.
here's another thing. Here's a weird thing we can get into also with water. So there's a very interesting conversation happening lately around psychedelics and spirituality and consciousness that involves aliens. And this conversation, well, the alien conversation has been heating up for a number of years now. And uh, the conversation is now taking a new turn.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of interest in aliens as kind of spiritual entities. And now, since this idea is emerging, there's an interesting crossover into religion. And what are these things? And there's been some interesting discussions with Tucker Carlson lately. And he brought up the specific fact of that these things are coming from underwater. And, I don't know if anybody has seen any of these released videos, but like the so-called Tic Tacs, they're not flying saucers, but these little Tic Tac shaped UFOs or UAPs now that come from underwater, or if they don't come from underwater, after they finish flying around in the sky in all these unusual directions, they go underwater. And Tucker Carlson in a recent conversation referenced that and was talking about aliens. And he said, I don't think that they're coming from another world. I think they've been here all along. And that's an interesting idea, especially if they're coming from underwater. So that's a sign of the times and how much weirdness is going on. And I think all that weirdness is going to continue because it seems like we might have some unintegrated parts of our collective unconscious psyche, whatever, that we have not dealt with for many, many decades. And I think now there's these extraordinary experiences of consciousness that are kind of poking its head up here and there like a game of cosmic whack-a-mole. And it's really going to make us wrestle with what is reality and what is humanity. And so I think that conversation around aliens, are they entities? Are they like, some people now are saying they're like demons or maybe they're angels. And that's interesting because the famous guy, Chris Bledsoe, with the property in North Carolina, who's had dozens of alien encounters on his property, says that these are entities. They're not physical. They're energetic. And he talks about the lady in white, a white woman that he's seen a number of times. And that's not to me what I envision as an alien. That's some kind of entity, divine encounter or something like this. So I think this whole conversation is going to get ever more interesting, especially now that people are going to start thinking about maybe these aliens, entities, whatever they are, aren't coming from out there somewhere. Maybe they've been here all along on Earth, and maybe also they're inside us.
I love it. I always, when I think of the word alien, like lately I've been thinking you wouldn't even be able to describe it because it's alien. Just the word alien, like we have this idea of what an alien might look like because we've been programmed with movies and books and all this stuff. But the truth is, like, you wouldn't even be able to see it because you wouldn't even be able to comprehend it unless it made itself available to you and it took a form that you were familiar with. Because otherwise, it would just look like noise. It would just look like a background on some level. Like, how would you even decide? You wouldn't be able to know what it is.
Yeah, well, and this is where it gets really, really trippy because some of the things coming up lately with our framing of reality,
Yes,
and kind of around monistic idealism and
yep,
and simulation theory and quantum whatever, fill in the blank. The idea of the observer effect. Something doesn't really take shape and form until we observe it. And then also somebody recently was telling me that there's something they read, maybe a study done that found that our brain actually isn't processing what we actually see until after a 15-second delay. And the more I learn about the default mode network, the default mode network is basically like a filter because there's too much stimuli coming in for our little, feeble brains to handle. So it's filtering out a whole bunch of that. And then maybe there's this 15-second delay to actually compute what we're seeing in the end after like whatever huge percentage has been taken out. And so, yeah, man, like our brains are not exactly the most trustworthy and reliable. So, yeah, that's an interesting question then, because in a sense, we're not physical either. because that's the really weird thing when you get down to the nuts and bolts of the quantum stuff, is that that's the observer effect. It's not quote unquote solid or take shape or form until you see it. So if you turn your back on it, it's just constant, motion or whatever is happening. It's in its quantum state. So yeah, like an alien could be just quantum until we look at it, and then it's like, okay, well, for your little stupid, like meager, feeble human mind, okay, I'll give you a look at me for a little while.
I think that validates too. Like if you look back at human history, the one thing we always get right is that we always get it wrong. Like the planets are not in glass spheres. We're not the center of the universe. It's not, the Earth is not flat. Like they're, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't even know about North and South America, or Europeans didn't know about North and South America. So like it's not that far-fetched to think that we are on the cusp of discovering a whole new frontier right here in front of us. Like we just have such a limited concept of awareness. Like we could be at the forefront of a giant discovery that fundamentally changes the way we walk through reality.
Not to freak people out, but I think, yeah, that's absolutely going to be true. Yeah, it's very unusual, very exciting these times we live in. The more and more content I consume and videos I watch, people are talking about this from all kinds of different angles.
Right.
What's happening now with consciousness. That was another interesting remark Tucker Carlson made recently. He said that for some reason after World War II, that the West and primarily the United States just stopped being spiritual, stopped considering any kind of spiritual topics and consciousness and stuff like that. It was like dropping the atom bomb, almost killed our soul or something like that. And now after so many decades, like 80 years or whatever after World War II, now we're becoming forced to wrestle with consciousness, because consciousness cannot be held down, held back, impeded, put away for forever. It's coming back with a vengeance. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right that there's going to be a lot of weird things happening. I mean, they already are. And these are going to be things beyond our comprehension, because we've totally disregarded that aspect of our lives. And that doesn't mean that it's not real and that it's not there. That was another interesting kind of finger to the pulse moment with this recently. I found a psychedelic therapist on LinkedIn not long ago and had a conversation, and he crosses over into paranormal experiences and aliens and UFO encounters. And I was like, whoa, this is fascinating, because I was a huge X-Files fan back in the day. And he's saying, yeah, there's a lot of people that, excuse me, do psychedelics. And, if not during the experience, maybe perhaps afterwards integrating, they have encounters with aliens or UFOs. And so he's trying to help people integrate these experiences. And I'm like, wow, man, this is freaking fascinating. And I asked him, I said, do you think that these encounters with aliens, UFOs, entities, with these paranormal experiences, do you think they're happening more now? Or do you just think that because everybody's got, a camera in their pocket and in their hand 24/7, that they're just being reported now more and documented more, so it makes it look like they're happening more? And he said, no, I honestly think they're legitimately happening more often now. And I kind of feel the same way, that these experiences are happening more often with people. And that's like what I said, consciousness is coming back with a vengeance. It can't be held down forever. Now, I don't know what this all means. I don't know what the heck aliens are. All I know is that I think there's going to be a lot more just weirdness and strange experiences and phenomenon happening in the very near future. That's going to really, it's going to blow our minds and really make us wrestle with what reality is.
I love it. I had I remember back maybe about 3 years ago, I took this giant dose, like 12 grams of like PE. And I remember being in my bed and like I was getting contacted by aliens. Like I had a direct line to what I thought was like this alien mothership, and they were filling me in on my history. And they were like, look, you came here from another planet. We're contacting you now because it's time. Like, here's what happened in your life. Like, your whole generation has led to you, and we are the aliens. You are the alien. George, your family are the aliens. And I remember it was so profound. It was like 3 in the morning, and I'm like, I gotta call my mom and my sister, let them know we're aliens. You know? But like, I recommend no one do that. Don't call your parents, don't call loved ones when you're 12 grams deep and start talking about aliens, because it just doesn't go out very well. But I'll never forget the message that I got. And then that took me down this road of like, dude, maybe we're the aliens. And if you start looking about how we live our lives and what we really know about this planet, like we don't know anything about this planet. And it would seem congruent that a species that comes to a new planet, they wouldn't know much about it. You know, they may have had, they don't know shit about it. They don't know where to live. They don't know if they get sunburned. They don't know about the animals. They don't know about anything, man. What's your thoughts on us being the aliens?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, that's something that's discussed in fringe circles online, and it's fascinating to dip into because we don't. I mean, this is something that a lot of people uh, just don't think about because it's something that is very uncomfortable to think about, could cause a lot of cognitive dissonance. Where do we come from? I mean,
Yeah.
the whole idea of evolution is being challenged, that there's some missing
Yeah.
link and there was enough time for us to evolve from apes and monkeys and blah, 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 even stoned ape theory, all that. But then there's a lot of people that think, yeah, that maybe we are aliens because we really have no clue. Where
Yeah.
the hell did humanity and human beings come from? We do not know. And it's kind of weird because we're the only ones that are self-aware and conscious and who can talk. So that's the question for the ages, is where the heck did we come from? So yeah, maybe we are the aliens. And these ideas, once you start looking into them, they're not totally tinfoil hat territory. I mean, the mainstream and the polite crowd is going to think, oh yeah, let's send you straight to a white padded cell with some Thorazine and a tinfoil hat and a straitjacket. But something that's often discussed is the who is it? The Dogon tribe of Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They think they came from the stars, and they have this myth, this story that's been passed down for however many millennia or whatever, that they came from the stars. And I think it's, are you serious, or in the are you serious area or constellation, like they know exactly what star it was they came from, and they talk about the people that brought them here. Like, so what the heck is going on there? You know, and that's something kind of interesting and real, mind bender that I talked about in this last Substack about the octopus, is that, I remember writing it years ago. I think it was like at least 10 years ago in 2015, when that helicopter went over the Amazon and it filmed those uncontacted tribes. And those uncontacted tribes had never seen a helicopter before. It was like that old 1980s movie of the caveman that
Yeah.
they have in confinement, and he sees the helicopter and wants to like go jump on the helicopter because he thinks it's like the bird god or whatever. Those uncontacted tribes in the Amazon are wearing loincloths and like trying to throw spears at the helicopter. So think about that. If there's one primitive tribe on Earth, doesn't that mean that there can be others? And if there's others, why can that not be you?
Yeah.
So there's the opposite. Okay, maybe we're aliens, but then there's maybe the opposite. Maybe we're actually the most primitive tribe on Earth. Maybe just because we have electricity, internet, and can get a DoorDash pizza in 10 minutes, maybe that doesn't make us the most evolved. We have a lot of hubris as human beings. So, I think everybody kind of needs to strap in and check themselves, because in 5 or 10 years, you might be like, yeah, man, I was that guy in the Amazon pointing my spear at the helicopter all along.
Yeah. I like that. I if you just really take a look at it, like we are pretty primitive. I think it's uh Eric Weinstein has this theory, like if you took all the screens out of your room would look almost identical to like it did in 1970. Like what have we really done? We have all these ideas, like we've done all these things, but like what have we really done? Like I don't know, not that much.
No, and I really think that kind of syncs up with that interesting point that Tucker Carlson made recently, is that, yeah, after World War II, after the atom bomb, we just kind of lost all of our spirituality. We just kicked consciousness aside and lost our soul. And all great art and all the great ideas and all the great movements and inspiration and dreams and imagination comes out of soul. And that's basically what that Eric Weinstein thought is about, is we've not added soul. And people are waking up to this now, that, America physically, aside from the natural beauty, the national parks and all that stuff, America's not a pretty place right now. Like our art and our architecture, it's just not, it doesn't add anything to life. It's not making people happy, smile, joy. It's not soulful. We need to put soul back into our society and culture again. And it's interesting that people are realizing that. And so, that's, I think, exactly what Weinstein's getting at is, you take all your screens out of your room and what kind of soul is left? There is none.
Yeah, there is none. It's interesting too.
And I think, again, to bring it full circle, I think, consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, is saying, oh, no, you've had me on timeout for way too long. I've been grounded by you guys for way too long. I'm coming back with a vengeance now. And as I think these extraordinary, phenomenon and experiences of consciousness continue happening, I think there's going to be all kinds of art and inspiration and visions coming out of that are going to be wildly fascinating. The visionary art, like the visionary art, I feel is going to come back in a big way.
I think it already is. Like I spend a lot of time on like the art Twitter or the on X on like the art department. And if you look at some of the new digital art coming out, that's sort of the next generation of like Alex Gray, like there's so many programs right now. And like, it's, you can see these incredible tesseracts with like tentacles coming off of them. And like, it's artwork like I've never seen in my life before. And if you really if you want to stop yourself from doom scrolling, go check out like the art pages on X, and it'll just blow your mind to see what some of the artists are creating nowadays. And it's not like there's one or two great artists. There's people from all over the world creating mind-blowing artwork that's, if you want to push it, you could say we're sort of in a renaissance right now. Just the creation that's coming out or bubbling to the surface. It's well needed, but I think we are in the midst of a soulful artistic revolution that's starting at the bottom and working its way towards the top.
Yeah, it could be. I wouldn't doubt it. Because people now are realizing that we need some kind of spiritual dimension to our lives. We need some amount of soul, and that our consciousness is a good thing to nourish and cultivate. And yet that's been pushed aside for a long time in our society and culture. And why is that? And I think there's other conversations and topics and subjects that kind of point to this. The whole ancient civilization conversation now with Graham Hancock over the past 10 or 15 years. I mean, that's that I'm smitten by that whole conversation. I find that fascinating. And why has that taken off, that conversation? Why is there so much interest in that and obsession with that? So I think that also points to consciousness, because it appears that, previous civilizations, ancient civilizations, had some amount of skill, talent, knowledge, technology that we don't possess today.
Yeah, there's a great book by Anatoly Fomenko, and it's called History, Science or Fiction. And he goes all the way back to this, I guess there's this strange anomaly called parameter D. And he measures humanity by the eclipses. He goes, that's like the best form of time, because eclipses are like the most regular thing that happened, and we can date them back. And he dates this thing. There's like a problem in math called parameter D, where this eclipse never happened. And he goes, if that eclipse never happened, that means that we're not really in 2025. It means we're like in 1550. And he goes back and he traces back all of like the lineage of like history and stuff like that. But I would recommend anybody listening to this that wants to understand a little bit more about hidden history, check out Anatoly Fomenko. It's an incredible series of books that just really gets into the timeline and where we are and how we got here. I want to bring in Jesse. What's up to Jesse? You are an amazing young woman. I see you on all these stages right now. I can't wait to catch up with you. She says, wide scale disconnection. That loss of soul that you're speaking of likely translates to the continuous climb of disease, of despair in our society. It's truly something we need to course correct. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 1000%. Yeah, second the motion, all the way home. I've written about that before in regards to trauma. That's something that I talked a little bit about at Psychedelic Science. I think. Oh man, we can get into a really weird
Yeah.
conversation with this. I think that's something that we need to, not only in the psychedelic community, but just everyone at large needs to expand the conversation beyond psychedelic healing and psychedelic therapy into what is causing the trauma. And that is largely a loss of soul, along with a loss of hope for the future, a loss of vision for where not only people's individual lives are going, but where is America going? We have no collective vision. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I mean, just watch YouTube and just bounce around randomly through YouTube and just watch everyday average Americans who are, whether it's an elderly person living in their car, some young person who's like 24, 25 and burnt out and realizes corporate America is a soul sucking vampire, or somebody who's like 20 and realizes college is a scam. It's like so much of America is waking up to the lies and the deception. We are having this kind of conscious expansion in spiritual moment right now that's like a great revealing of all the lies and manipulation. So we do need soul desperately because that's what causes a lot of the addiction, the alcohol abuse, the substance abuse. But we have to look at the source of that. And I think last year, the last I researched, there's 200 million people in the United States with trauma. And like I've been saying for a long time now, and in psychedelic science, there's not enough therapists in the country to handle 200 million people with trauma. There's not enough plant medicine in the world to deal with 200 million people with trauma. So in the end, I see a lot of psychedelic healing as reactive. It's not proactive. We need to be proactive and find out what's causing the trauma and turn it off, at the source, and turn off the faucet. Otherwise, we're going to be like a dog chasing its own tail forever. And then, a really, really hot, spicy subject recently that kind of can put the spotlight on some of this is what's going on with Jeffrey Epstein. Because of the 200 million people with trauma, how many of those are, childhood sexual abuse and the victims of human trafficking? And I think, I would make the logical step that if people in the psychedelic community are interested in healing trauma, that we should be even that much more interested in preventing trauma so it never even happens in the first place and never even needs to be healed. So with Epstein, I think it's an interesting opportunity to put a spotlight and some attention towards, hey, look, we got a problem with this in this country and it's real. This isn't something that's, coming from our imagination. This is a real problem and we need to wake up and take care of this.
When I look at that whole thing, I can't help but see a structure behind it. Like it seems institutional. And maybe this is me with my tinfoil hat on, but it seems like there is a group, an entity, a caste that preys on the illness and the sickness and the depravity of the rest of us. Like I can't help but see that. Like it seems institutional on some level. Like it permeates everything. And how can that not come from an organized area? How can that not come from an organized place? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's kind of two different levels you can talk about. There's like the tinfoil hat level, and then there's the absolute white padded cell level.
Let's go white padded cell.
Level, what did you say?
Let's go white padded cell.
Oh, well, I mean, this is something that I've come across in conversations lately, around this idea of a great revealing going on, and that we've been suppressing and repressing our consciousness and spirituality for too long. And I find it very interesting because a lot of the people having these conversations, they're not like ungrounded. They're not woo-woo. They
Yeah.
don't look crazy. They don't sound crazy. They're intelligent, educated people. And one of the things that comes up occasionally is this idea that we've been put here to basically be farmed, that humans are being farmed to harvest our souls. And some people will suggest or theorize that we were put here by the Anunnaki, that the Anunnaki are here farming our souls, and that our souls, when they're tormented and miserable and in despair, and we're always suffering from war, famine, poverty, that it makes our souls, quote unquote, richer to be harvested. And like with how weird stuff is nowadays, I don't disregard anything. I'm not totally believing it, but like I said, I hold everything in suspension between belief and disbelief, and I just sit there with it and just let it stay there. So I mean, like, who the hell knows? Who the hell knows?
Yeah, I don't know either, but I subscribe to that on some level. I mean, if you read Zecharia Sitchin, he gives you a pretty detailed account of the Anunnaki, of how he can take you back to Africa and show you Adam's calendar and all these places where, we are being farmed on some level. And it's a fascinating read to read that series. But if you just extrapolate outwards, the same things that people are saying Jeffrey Epstein and these people did to kids is happening to all of us on some level. Like there is this collective trauma that you go through, and it's sinister. It's disgusting, and I don't like. Why is it? Why do you think that those files don't come out? Like clearly people know. I mean, it seems that people have seen the files. There's all kinds of talk about the files. People seem to be implicated in the files. Are those things ever coming out, Adam? What do you think?
Let me make an important point about something first about psychedelics
Okay.
before I get back into those files. I don't think they're ever going to be released, but we'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
I think it's something really good that people can learn with psychedelics or use psychedelics for is that I think a lot of people don't go into these super dark places that are very often real because they can't. Your mind and spirit can't handle how dark the world is. And I think that's something that
Mhm.
psychedelics can help with because of these experiences of awe. The world can never be out of balance. Everything is yin and yang. So as dark and sinister and evil and clandestine the reality in the world might look, it can also look just as grandiose and mystical and awesome and beautiful and cosmic. So by having
Yeah.
those experiences of awe, it allows you to see those dark, sinister sides and kind of be a spiritual warrior and be able to handle that and not crumble on a psychic level. And I
Yeah.
think that's super important because this Epstein case is so important to make it plant that seed of reality in people's minds that this is human trafficking is real and it's happening almost everywhere and more often than you realize. One of the great journalists that's covered Epstein a lot is Nick Bryant. Nick Bryant has been on it for over 10 years. He was the guy that got got Epstein's black book, which everybody mistakenly thinks is some kind of a client list. There is no client list. There's no client list that's ever going to come out. The closest thing to a client list is that black book that Epstein had. And it was his butler or like housekeeper or house manager that had it in Miami or Fort Lauderdale in the early 2000s that leaked it and gave it to Nick Bryant. And Nick Bryant's written books about Epstein, and he's been on the podcast circuit lately because, of course, this is all blown up again in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And Nick Bryant has done the research, and on his podcast, he said, I got it written down right here. The CDC says that 25% of girls and 5% of boys suffer sexual abuse every year in the United States. 25% of girls and 5% of boys. That's 50 million children plus. Over 50 million children a year are being sexually abused. And that's a conservative number because of how much of it goes unreported
Right.
because of
Right.
shame and embarrassment or just like bearing it in your subconscious. Department of Health and Human Services says something like 240 to 325,000 women and girls get trafficked a year. I mean, these are mind-boggling numbers. And how does our society get to this place where this has been has become so common and basically accepted. And that's the big thing with Epstein, is that there was an interview done with a survivor of Epstein's recently. I can't remember her name, one of the lesser known ones, because now a lot of them have died, including Virginia Giuffre. Yeah. And so this woman did a podcast interview recently, and somebody asked her, I think, the basic question, why don't they let these files out? And this woman, like, I really do believe she was trafficked by Epstein, because if you watch her, like, you just see the kind of toll that life has taken on her in her face and her facial expressions. And at the end, she says, she has this very haunting response to that question. She says something like, if these people like let out what has happened with Epstein, like, you have no idea what people would do to them. Because it's a reckoning with what's happening in our society at the highest levels of power, whether it's political or financial, because there's a huge financial aspect to this. I mean, it's the most powerful people in the world that are doing this to us, and we are letting it happen. And it's a real reckoning. Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to let ourselves still live in this world where we accept these things happening? And that's why this conversation is continuing, because it's both sides. It's not red or blue. It's not D or R. As one of my favorite journalists puts it, Kim Iverson, it's two cheeks of the same ass.
Yeah, it's left wing, right wing, same bird.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I've been following this story for at least 7-8 years. I picked up on it before Epstein was arrested the second time. And it goes way beyond human trafficking. That's what a lot of people don't realize, that was just a part of a bigger operation. It was a honeypot scheme to get confident on powerful people, especially politicians. What was really going on was a whole bunch of, illegal sales of things, probably arms, and a huge amount of money laundering, because Epstein worked with all the biggest banks in the world. And so he was likely involved with intelligence agencies, because his background, man, when you look at his background, he had no talent. He wasn't even smart. He was kind of manufactured and made.
Yeah.
I think he didn't even maybe he graduated high school, but he dropped out of college. And then he ended up being like a math professor at Waldorf School, like this really prestigious elite preparatory school in New York. Like, how does that happen? And then, that's when all the weirdness starts, because the head of the school, I think at the time, was Bill Barr's dad.
Yeah. Yep.
Bill Barr is the former AG of the United States, and his dad was in the CIA. And that happened back in the late 70s, early 80s. So, I mean, I think this scandal has potential to be as big as JFK and or Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, maybe bigger. It might have a bigger impact if you look at the way in which
it could be bigger. And that's why I think this is happening. It is like a bump in consciousness of the bad kind, of the dark variety, and yet at the same time, very important, because Americans, I think, are realizing how important this is. And I saw a great meme about it. You know, that meme where you see the two strong guys with huge arms, arm wrestling, and they got their fists clenched in the middle, and one side will say Dems and the other side will say Republicans. And then the fist is Epstein. It's like the only issue that could unite all of us. And that's great, because I think it's something that could really bring out the pitchforks and the torches, because it's deep and dark and super important. Yeah, because it's destroying our country. Because if you just start understanding trauma and the way trauma works, and how once a person is traumatized, how likely it is that their behavior or their actions in life traumatize more people, it's just like this virus of soul destruction, rampaging across the country for decades. And a lot of it is pretty much orchestrated, by very powerful people at the very top of our country, whether, financial, political, scientific, sometimes also. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole bunch of no bueno.
Yeah. Another good book is Whitney Webb wrote a really good book I haven't read it. I've just seen excerpts of it, but it's called One Nation Under Blackmail. And she
I
talks
have to
about,
read it. I
yeah,
have to. I know all. I've been following Whitney for years.
yeah,
I know all about that stuff. I haven't read her books yet. I just watched a nice. Was it after school or before school vid on YouTube? He interviewed Whitney and asked her the question, "Do you fear for your life reporting on these things?" And man, she had a beautiful answer. Beautiful, beautiful answer. She said, "I can't allow myself to be afraid. I can't allow fear to enter my mind because." Well, she used I think, referred to the Dune quote about fear being the mind killer. And she had a very spiritual answer. And then I think she might have also kind of gotten off a little bit into the interesting hinterlands by saying, essentially this boils down to a spiritual war. We're in a
yeah,
spiritual war in the sense that do we want to live in a country that accepts this type of behavior? Collectively as a people, that human trafficking is okay. But then in another sense, we're in a spiritual war with the people doing this to us in our country that most of us people don't want running our country and our society. Like, it's time for some kind of house cleaning. And that starts with us individually on the inside. And for example, admitting to ourselves that these phenomenon are real. And it does happen. And that's something that makes this time truly, truly bizarre, this great revealing, because I realized this, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, as crazy as he is, as hated as he is, and as big as his tinfoil hat is, somebody had one thing right for many, many years. And that man was Alex Jones. He's been talking about child sex trafficking and human trafficking for forever, forever. And, like my dad always said, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And a lot of people have lost, sight of that fact. And I'm not saying like we should, exalt, Alex Jones, but hey, like realize these are how weird and strange these times are that we're living in, you know? And so I hope that this Epstein moment, wakes us up to having to take the reins of our country back, because there's a bunch of psychopaths, at the wheel. And that's another dark aspect of reality. I think it's called, what is it? Ponerology, maybe? There's an actual scientific field of study dedicated to psychopathy and the prevalence of it among CEOs, politicians,
yeah.
and leaders, because there's a higher percentage of psychopathy among politicians, leaders, and CEOs. I think it's like, what, 5% or less in the normal population. But once you separate out politicians, CEOs, leaders, it jumps up to like 15 or 20%, because the system we've created actually benefits psychopathic behavior. And that really is the ultimate, mind funk, is when you start realizing that our world to a large extent could be run by psychopaths. I mean, that's messed up. But like I said, I think psychedelics can help with that, because it can be a shield to that darkness. It can be the light when you have these mystical, a divine influx, a mystical experience. See something that's truly awesome, because there's the good out there, and the light is just as white and bright as the darkness is black and oily.
Man, I love it. And I think if you want to underscore the John Ronson writes a good book called The Psychopath Test, where he talks about how we self-select leaders on psychopathic behavior. But you don't need to read that book. All you need to do is go to work at like a Fortune 500 company, or go work somewhere and see like how you're treated. Like, you are treated like a number. And no wonder there's more people than ever dropping out of the workforce. No wonder there's more people than ever that are like, I'm just not going to do it anymore. This is ridiculous. I was watching this video of some young kids talking about like, what's the point of even working? I'll never afford a house. I can never afford to have a family. I can't have any of it. Like, why even do it? And then on some level, I see that as a sign of rebellion, a sign of hope, and a sign of people standing up. Like, I am not going to participate in a system that treats me less than who I really am. And you can see it happening. Like, on all these layoffs and all of these quiet quitting and all these techniques are sort of adaptions of people like, okay, I'll just be poor and I won't have anything then. And you guys can have all that. But the system can't work unless it has like this slave mentality of people going. And psychedelics do that. I know tons of people that have had huge journeys and are like, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna leave this relationship. And often in the nomenclature, it says like you shouldn't make giant moves like that, but maybe you should. Maybe once you come back from seeing the light in a way, you shouldn't go back to a system that doesn't serve you. Maybe that's the benefit of psychedelics. Maybe that's seeing the light. Maybe that's finding the courage in yourself to start living a life worth living. And maybe it doesn't feel very good at first on some level, but I guarantee you the weight comes off if you start making those giant moves.
Oh no, yeah, like this the kind of stuff that makes me want to dance and sing barefoot around a burning effigy at night. Yeah, that's another aspect of this great revealing that we're going through. That's
Yeah.
another beautiful thing on YouTube is just watching normal people just check out
Yeah.
and just leave the system and corporate America and waking up to what a scam corporate America is. I learned this like way long ago in my 20s. I wasn't even 30, and I realized what a mess corporate America is. And it's taken a while for the rest of the mainstream to catch up. And it's brilliant to see that people are waking up to this now. And I think that's a huge aspect of the great revealing is this
Yeah.
shit grows flowers moment. People are just taking a huge dump on the system. And like, hey, are they wrong? No, because that post-World War II system where we kind of moved to a suburban America and kind of built the American dream, literally and figuratively, people could have an easy factory, not easy in the sense of like how hard the job was, but it was quote unquote easy because you made good money at a factory job. You only had to have a high school education. You could buy a house, afford vacations, have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence and a happy family and a wife, beautiful kids, and a great life. And
Yeah.
now that's just destroyed and gone. And so the carrot or the stick in front of the horse isn't there anymore. So why should you participate in this corporate system if you can barely survive? Like people they just have a few dollars left over now after they pay for everything, and there's no carrot or stick leading them. So everybody's like, screw it. I would rather not have my soul devoured, and I would rather just leave the system and then suffer the consequences of trying to deal with that choice of exiting and bailing on the system. So you have people, finding roommates who have never had roommates before, or maybe adult children moving back in with their parents, or people going to van life, or maybe somebody like me going to Mexico. And I think that's going to very much create a phoenix rises from the ashes moment. I think that old world, man, it's burning hard right now. It's up in flames. There is no hope for it. There is not enough firefighters or water out there to put out this fire. And yet the phoenix is going to rise from it. And it's really a form of creative destruction or destructive creation. And I think all these people making these huge life decisions to not conform and not obey that system anymore is going to create something brilliant and beautiful in the future. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't even know if it'll be in our lifetime. We may not see the fruits of that seed for quite some time, but man, I can tell you right now, it is a huge, powerful force. And I think the more people that realize that, the more is going to be possible and potential for the future.
Yeah. If you can almost see it. Let me jump to some comments real fast. I got some more thoughts on that, but I want to get these people, I want to get everybody in here. First off, the incredible Henrietta. If you guys aren't checking out what Henrietta's writing, like you're missing out. She's just an incredible person, objective recovery. She has so much brilliant work out there. She says one of the biggest illusions of human materialism may be the grandiose perception that only we possess consciousness. It limits the study of consciousness a great deal, even with scientific methods. Yeah, like this is my issue with science. Like I think science itself is so limiting. Like it wants to measure everything, and then the fact when it can't measure stuff, it just says it's not relevant. And like one of the things that drives me crazy with science is like they do these experiments, but like they never say, doesn't it matter what time they do it on what day? You know what I mean? Like, they don't ever factor in that. Like, they don't ever factor in the time because they can't figure out how to measure it. But if you're in a different part of space and you do something different, doesn't that change the way it's done when you're in a different part of space? It seems like it would to me, but what are your thoughts on what Henrietta has to say?
I just thought of something interesting. Are there
Okay,
time zones in space?
of course. Okay, look at it like this, Adam. This is how I see it. If
Is
you
it is
look
so
at,
instead of like central and mountain, is there like 10 light year time zone, 20-year light year time zone? Like,
of
how's that work?
course, of course, they're like, what is there seasons in space? If you think about the Earth being tilted on its axis, on its axis, and like you have these seasons, and we're going around the sun. Aren't isn't our solar system going around like the galaxy, and our galaxy
Well, man,
going
you're
around?
getting into the precession of the equinoxes now. I mean, and that gets back to the ancient civilization stuff and Graham Hancock. I
Right?
mean, yeah. And that's something I think that's an aspect of this great revealing
Yeah, yeah, I
is that
agree.
we are going into the age of Aquarius, where I think,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, we're leaving Pisces and entering Aquarius. And yeah, years ago, I wouldn't have bought into this stuff as much. And now I'm like, man, this seems to make perfect sense. Because then it gets into interesting things about Aquarius and its sound frequency. It's basically an air sign, I think, and then which means what travels through air, sound frequency and vibration. And these are things that are being talked about more often now, especially in scientific fields, because I think there are a lot of um, limitations around science. And to get to Henrietta's point,
yeah.
absolutely true. I think that's part of the great revealing. Is a lot of people are waking up to the scam that we've been sold, probably by Edward Bernays, the nephew
Hmm.
of Carl, not Carl Jung, excuse me, of Sigmund
Sigmund
Freud.
Freud.
This whole materialism, consumer materialism thing, that he who dies with the most toys wins. I think people are waking up to that because now people can't buy anything. You know, you buy you pay for your rent, your car, your utilities, your food, and then there's nothing left. And so people are like, what the hell, man? They can't buy the stuff to distract from the void in their soul. So
Yeah.
now we're really forced to confront that void head on. It's like what David Chappelle talked about during the pandemic. Everybody was forced to shut down and stop working and not do anything in America. And when we're all in our homes and apartments, we finally had to be introspective, involuntarily introspective. We looked around at all these beautiful homes we own, the pianos, the couches, the furniture, the cars, the boats, the computers, the entertainment systems. We all asked ourselves the same question: is any of this making us happy? And most of us said no. And so I think that's another aspect that, yeah, like whether it's work and people dropping out of the corporate world or people dropping out of, oh, hey, all this stuff makes us happy. I mean, yeah, there's just massive upheaval and chaos happening right now, and just a lot of potential at the same time for a new vision of the future and a new world to live
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For COVID for me was a giant wake up call because I was putting in like 60, 70 hours a week, and then all of a sudden I was home, and I never forgot, like I realized what I was missing. It was like you go out and you work 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, and you realize your kids growing up and you don't know them. The relationship you have with your wife or your husband is just surface level at best. And like you realize when you're at home, you're like, I have missed all the things that have been important in my life, for a commute, for a handful of dimes, for these trinkets that I put myself to sleep with. Like COVID was a ritual, man. It was a rite of passage for so many people. And I've talked to many people who have shared that same story with me. Like, yeah, I woke up at that point in time. And all of a sudden, and isn't it strange that like you have this moment of clarity, and then all of a sudden there's this injection coming for you? I can't help but think that those two things are connected.
yeah, an injection like a divine influx. Yeah, and that's not actually very strange. That's very common, and it's something that I've ran across in recent conversations. I've known about this for a little while, but it's becoming a more popular topic. This relationship between some kind of traumatic experience or event um, to some kind of mystical insight, a divine
Yeah.
influx, some kind of download. This has been
Yes.
going on for centuries, if not millennia, with shamans,
Yep.
um, and this pain or this hurt that begets some kind of insight or wisdom. Shit grows flowers, and that's what COVID did. COVID was a gigantic, just like, yeah, just a right cross to everyone's face out of nowhere. They just all sent us down to the mat. And that brought a lot of benefits because people examine their lives. And then, not only examine their lives, then examine the bigger systems, society, culture, the government, science, all kinds of things. And I think those ripples, it was like a little stone thrown into a pond, and those ripples are still, kind of fractaling outwards and getting bigger. And we're still feeling the effects and consequences, and we will be for years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. Let's see. Robert Sean Davis chimes back in here. He says, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Plus, it doesn't help that there seems to be an indoctrination process amongst the elite that incorporates horrific acts in order to facilitate membership. Even as there are multiple dimensional layers for access that may circumvent this reality on a special relativity basis, you can transform through love outside those horrors. Should watch the Eric Weinstein Pierce Morgan interview regarding the installation of kill switches as a means of control. I got to check that out. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I agree 100%. There, it seems to me that the underlying narrative is that these horrific acts on some level are an initiation into a group of people that will control you forever. And I know what that may sound like to people, but I mean, the evidence seems pretty clear to me. Like there's clearly this sort of, and I think it was even Peter Thiel. I saw an interview with Peter Thiel who says it's a rite of passage to be compromised. And when you have people at the highest level, talking about, oh yeah, this is just something that's normal. Like, what more evidence do you need?
Okay, so like I agree with that. Somebody said that, and I forgot who it was. It's a political commentator that I definitely would say they know what they're talking about. Oh, I know who it was. It was the journalist who I mentioned earlier, Nick Bryant, the Epstein journalist. Because the two best Epstein journalists are Whitney Webb and Nick Bryant. Nick Bryant was saying Americans are just naive. Americans have no idea how much blackmail happens and how much intelligence agencies are using honeypot operations and have compromat on people and things like this. And I would totally agree with that. And when he says intelligence agencies, he doesn't mean just our own.
Yeah, I know.
He means intelligence agencies from around the world.
Right.
And then specifically, once you start learning about intelligence agencies, you learn that there's only a certain few that are really good using honeypot operations. It's definitely not the Chinese. The Chinese, for example, are not into that. They're more into like business spying. They want to steal like business secrets,
right?
Maybe military stuff like that. They're not into using honeypot operations. And basically, the three intelligence agencies that are really good at that are the Americans, the British, the English, and then Israel.
Yeah.
So there you go. Good luck wrestling with that. Because then what does that mean? But yeah, then in terms of initiation, that word, you could say, triggers some things in my mind. And it's interesting because I would say this is kind of like a second go round of Epstein. When did he, I forgot the timeline now when he got arrested and when he died, but it's been a few years since he died. And, kind of things went quiet. It didn't go dead. It didn't go flatline, but things got really quiet. And now it's all come back because Trump broke his promise. And so there's a lot of things coming around about the Epstein story on the second lap that are going from the fringes to more mainstream. And I find that very good and very promising. And some of those things are starting to dip into what was going on beyond the sex trafficking operation. And I've seen a picture of something pop up, which was from Epstein's Island in the Caribbean, which was this strange building on the island that was separate from his compound and from his house. And it looks like an ancient temple.
Yeah.
And I forgot what type of temple it is, but I'm talking ancient. I'm talking from like times of like Canaan, ancient, like going back that far. Because it's blue and white striped and it's got this gold dome on it. And there's some interesting theories about that, about what does that mean? Because that drew some interesting conversations around let's just say, initiations and certain ancient gods and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, getting into that stuff, let's just say, buy the industrial roll of aluminum foil or timber.
Yeah, I can't. It blows my mind to think how wide open the scandal is, and like how many people seem to know or seem to have information. And when, how long can a secret stay a secret when more and more people know? Like, how many people do you have to blackmail to keep things quiet? Like, how much pain and how much fear do you have to inflict to keep everybody quiet? Like, it has to come out at some point in time, I would imagine.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's easier than we imagine because we're
Okay,
naive in America. I
that's
think
true.
this has been going on for a long time, because once you get really deep into Whitney Webb, you find out that these things have been going on for a long time. And the
Yeah,
same thing with Nick Bryant. You get deep into Nick Bryant, and this has been going on in American history for a long time. You know,
yeah,
here's another
JFK.
real pretty, not so pretty dark underbelly of America is the Franklin scandal that happened in the
Mm,
1980s, which was basically identical to what's going on with Epstein. And you see a pattern of this happening throughout the United States. And then it goes back to one of the more interesting characters in American history, Roy Cohn. And who was
mm,
Roy Cohn? Roy Cohn was the mentor of Donald Trump. And Roy Cohn was he was the right-hand man of Joseph McCarthy during the 1950s, during the era of McCarthyism and the Red Scare and all that. Like Roy Cohn, you read about that guy, man, that guy was, let's just say, a piece of work, and very heavily involved with the American government, organized crime, and also probably intelligence agencies. And so you start seeing, when you go back in history and learn about things like the Franklin scandal and Roy Cohn, and then you learn about the CIA more and organized crime, there seems to be this thread that somewhere around World War II or during World War II, organized crime integrated with the CIA and has led to some foul, foul things.
Sometimes I ask myself the question, what would it take for an entire nation to turn against a group of people? And I would have to say what we're looking at now. Like that's what it would take. You know, and you start looking through the annals of history and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
I mean, yeah, that's like, you really start to think about this. And yeah, we're at a moment now where, like, if we let this go, then whatever happens afterwards is on us,
We deserve it.
because we did it to ourselves. It's this massive collective moment of, we have to look in the mirror and really look at our soul and see what it's made of. Do we want to live in a world, or in a country, much less a world, that condones this, that
Yeah.
makes this okay? Um, and it's a very interesting conundrum, because something I learned years ago living in Spain and learning a little bit about politics in Europe and some cultural differences is, in Europe, people mostly don't care about extramarital affairs among their politicians. It's just like, it's just human behavior to Europeans. Like, of course, people are going to cheat on each other, and those people are going to be politicians. We don't vote for them based on um,
Fidelity.
their moral
You're
purity.
right.
And here in the United States, it's the exact opposite. No, you are judged on your moral purity as a politician. So if you've cheated on anyone, oh man, we're not voting for you. So, okay, if we do that and judge people on their moral purity, if they're having an affair or not, then what happens when it comes to exploitation of children? You know, I mean, this is something that should be sending people out with pitchforks and torches to the White House lawn. And not only that, like, if you can't go to the White House, just show up to your state capitol. What if we could get like 5,000 people surrounding every state capitol in the United States, you know, and then maybe a few, you know, like 10,000, 20,000 surrounding the White House? There's a great story about that in the 70s, I think, with Nixon, when Nixon was in office, and the anti-Vietnam War protests were at their apex, and there were so many people surrounding the White House, and they were causing such a ruckus that Nixon was freaking out, and he was telling one of his aides, I think it was who was the old German dude with the glasses? I can't remember his name.
Um, yep, I
Yeah,
know you're talking about.
yeah, you know who I'm talking about. Anyways, he was telling him, he's like, "Oh my God, they're gonna come in. They're gonna storm the gates. Like they're gonna come in through the windows." Like, I mean, that's another thing too. A big difference I learned about politics in Europe versus the United States. In Europe, the people, or no, excuse me, the politicians fear the people. In the United States, the people fear the politicians, or you could just say government. In Europe, the government fears the people, and in the United States, the people fear the government. We have this completely backwards. Those politicians, they should always be afraid of us. And I think that's the whole point of this Epstein thing right now, is why they're so desperate to try and cover it up. Because if the truth comes out, I think it would send people into, who knows what would happen. I think we would just all up and just like take up our pitchforks and torches and be like, oh, hell no. No. This is not. No. And I think I mean, that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, look at like this something like when people take like get red pilled or black pilled or whatever. This is something I like about Michael Malice. If people watch Michael Malice, he's gone from that to the white pill, and something he brings up is like, look, communism like fell overnight pretty much. People just got an idea in their head that, hey, we're over it because we see, behind the Wizard of Oz, we see behind the veil, the curtain, we're holding all the cards. You guys aren't holding anything once we see through the illusion. And then once you get enough people out on the street, it just falls overnight. And we didn't think, did anybody in the 50s or 60s think that communism would ever end? You saw that as some kind of like monolithic, eternal, power structure that just would never fail. And that's completely gone. So now, and it happened like that. So, these things are very possible. And those are always things that we should remember and touch on in moments like this when we think, oh no, there's no way we can fight this Leviathan. There's no way it'll ever end or it'll ever die. Yet that's just all figment of our imagination.
Man, it's such a brilliant point. When you really look at the system and you pull back the curtain, you realize it's just all a grift. There's no
Yeah.
there's no real laws. There's definitely no justice. There's
No, we're learning that with Epstein.
yeah, there's zero justice. I think who was it that recently came out? I think it was James O'Keefe that came out with a piece that talked about like secret courts for politicians, for people that have tons of money, for people that are connected, and like there's a certain set of courts for these people and then a certain set of courts for these people. And like that's why there's never any justice. That's why there's no repercussions. And when there's no consequences, there's no change. But it doesn't take a whole lot of
Well,
imagination just to
everybody's
look and go,
compromised.
yeah, all of them. All of them. Like it
And
has to.
sometimes it's not even directly like through a honeypot operation, but people get into systems like here's a perfect example. I think it was a female judge in Florida last week, before the weekend, ruled against releasing the Epstein files or whatever information that the DOJ was trying to dig up, because there's a ton in Florida from when Epstein first got arrested. And then I forgot the second time where he was. No, was he arrested in New York? I can't remember. Anyways, his home in Fort Lauderdale or wherever, Palm Beach, wherever the heck that was. I mean, there's a ton of evidence and files, paperwork, whatever, from Florida. And he was in jail there the first time. But this, I think it was a district judge, or I don't know what level of judge in Florida that ruled against releasing the files. I think it was a woman. In this case, I think, some of these people aren't compromised directly, but they're at a lower level beneath people who are. And there's just a certain way that you have to play the game to keep your job and career. Yeah. There's a certain way that you have to behave. There's certain rulings you have to make. And so once you get in, nobody has to show you like the real film of the JFK assassination. You just see how people around you are acting, what they're saying, what they don't say. That's the most important thing, is what they don't say. And then you just do whatever everybody else does. And then in that way, you become compromised and corrupted as well. And so I think that's the scary thing now, is we see how the whole entire system is just infected by power, and has corrupted so much. We just need a total house cleaning, like a fumigation, Yeah, we need to put, like in Florida, people, the fumigation companies, they tent your house, and they put those gigantic tents over your
Yeah,
house, and they fill it with all that gas to kill all the termites and stuff. That's kind of what needs to happen to the country as a whole right now.
yeah. It almost goes full scale back to the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about entities. Like it's almost like there's a giant parasite on us and it's just sucking everything out of us. And like now we're aware of the parasite. How are we going to act to get rid of it? Like, how do you get rid of a parasite? Like,
Yeah, it's a spiritual war. It's a
yeah,
spiritual war. And it's on us collectively as a country and as a society. And then, of course, that means that it's on us individually.
yeah.
And it also means it's coming out of us individually and
Mm.
collectively. Like that's the whole enigma, is that we're contributing to it. Because, like we've talked about before, we've let spirit and soul and consciousness just erode. It's like a garden we've just let die. And I think that's what's allowed a lot of these things to manifest and happen, because that's been ignored. And what you've gotten in place of that, one of the wild conversations growing now is the influence of the CIA post World War II, and how much of what's been going on could be a psyop.
Yeah.
And that we're living in a world that's seeing the success of something like MK Ultra. Uh, because there's no proof or evidence that MK Ultra ever stopped in the late 1970s, after, what was it, the Rockefeller Commission uncovered it and brought it public. I mean, there's no evidence that it ever stopped. And I think that's a great place to start, is our intel agencies. Because I think they're wreaking a lot of havoc and chaos. And in order to go there, we have to temper the soul, and make the soul strong. Because another oxymoronic aspect of all this, the CIA has studied all things consciousness, spirit realm, soul. With the Gateway Project. I mean, all kinds of things that they've gotten into. I mean, well, I just with MK Ultra, they were
Yeah.
doing that, albeit in an evil and dark way. So if it's good enough for the CIA to get into all things spirit, soul, and consciousness, why isn't society at large doing it as well? That's an odd thing. Why would the CIA be big into that, but why would we be discouraged from doing so as a whole? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, especially when you look at MK Ultra and you look at the way in which they destroy someone morally, spiritually, and then they're able to control their behavior because they're broken. It doesn't seem too much to scale that up to a community level and then a state level and then a country level. Like, and for me, I'm so disillusioned. Like, whenever I see a school shooting, I'm like, that looks like it's staged to me. When you see like someone like David Hogg, who was like this quote unquote hero at this place, then you realize he currently works for the CIA now. Like, wait a minute, this kid was there, and then now he's here, and his father worked in the CIA. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, this looks like an op to me. And
Yeah,
once you
that's
see
something
it, you
that
can't
pops up
unsee it.
now. Yeah, that's something that pops up now a lot, George, with some of these shootings and odd things that happen. People will say online, "Oh, MK Ultra," and who knows if that's the truth or not. But just that idea is in people's minds.
Yeah,
That MK Ultra has done this to people and has the potential of controlling people to make things happen. That's a move forward. That's a really good thing, because we don't know how much of our reality is controlled or theatrics. And so I see that as a really positive move forward in terms of consciousness. Because a lot of those things are just too odd and too weird.
you know what? Maybe they didn't think about is that the long-term game plan. Or maybe they didn't think about the long-term consequences of MK Ultra. Because yes, in the short term, you may break people, but I think in the long term, you get Uncle Ted. I think everybody begins to see it. And what happens when you get a collective Ted Kaczynski? You know what I mean? Like, that's where we're at, man. I'm hopeful anyway, on some level. Like, that might be the end game for MK Ultra is Ted Kaczynski, a
Well,
collective unified.
I just saw a new video come on. I haven't watched it yet from a YouTube channel I watch sometimes. I think the channel is called Moon, and it was about a 20 or 25-minute or so video titled something like Uncle Ted or Ted Kaczynski warned you.
Yeah.
Because that's another big kind of part of the egregore nowadays. Something that terrifies me is the techno-feudalism / AI overlords.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I mean, you know, there's a whole buffet of existential crises to choose from to give you, you know, just like existential terror nowadays. I mean, whatever, climate change, you know,
Yeah.
have your pick. Mine is the tech overlords, AI, Matrix, going into all that. And that should definitely terrify people, because that's all going in a direction that's not good either. And there's a huge overlap of that techno-feudalism and AI overlord thing with psychedelics. And I think that doesn't get discussed enough. There's a long history of that. I mean, just going back to Timothy Leary towards the end of his life, Timothy Leary, what was that one book he wrote? I read, I think it was cyber something, cyber culture, Siberia, something. He was kind of investigating, exploring cyber culture, and starting getting into transhumanism. And I think that's all going in a very, very bad direction. A story just came out a couple of days ago about somebody, you know, there's all these people now using AI as a therapist or as some kind of, dare I say, God.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was talking with AI last week, whether as a therapist or a God, and it basically instructed the person to do self-harm and self-delete on a super specific, detailed level. Like it's to a point that the person talking about the story on YouTube couldn't read it because they would have gotten flagged by YouTube. Like what in the what? Yeah, I think people are embracing AI way, way too fast before considering the consequences of what's going to come out of all this. And I think it's going to come down to a very granular point where, you know, people now are rejecting self-checkout. I think it's going to have to become like that. I started using self-checkout years ago because it was faster. And then now, as people have gotten tired of it, I kind of have to. Try and always go to a human being, although I will still use self-checkout sometimes. But I think it's going to come to the same point with AI. We all are going to have to start choosing to just not use it, because it's collecting our data. And most people don't understand what happens when our data is getting collected and how dangerous that is. And there's already going to be a new problem coming on the near horizon with, like, I'm telling anybody right now, don't upload your picture, your videos, your personality, anything to AI. Don't ever do that, because they're going to be able to copy all of that and replicate you and clone you and then use you to make money, because you have no copyright or trademark or intellectual property of yourself or your consciousness, because there are no laws around it yet. And people are already doing this, and I guarantee it's going to happen. Just wait. Somebody's going to find they've been cloned, and some company's making money off their clone. They're going to be like, wait, you can't do that. That's me. But then the law and the courts are going to say, well, there's no law around it. There's nothing prohibiting it. So sorry, you lose. So don't put anything into AI. Don't, like, man, that's bad. And, you know, like, we're people in the psychedelic community are jumping all over AI. I think that's really, really dangerous. We should be very, very careful with what we're doing, because God knows what kind of beast we create that comes out of AI. I mean, if it's already telling people to self-delete and giving them instructions on how to do so, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. I'm kind of hopeful that AI does away with copyrights in general, that AI does away with patents in general, because it seems like so many people are creating. And right now, you know, it used to be if you wanted to make a video or you wanted to get these images, you'd have to go to Shutterstock, you'd have to go to one of these image libraries and pay for a subscription. But now, like, you don't even need to. Now you can just make your own image and figure it out. On some level, I think it has the potential to do away with copyright, because you see all these people that are like, hey, I made this song or I made that thing, and now I'm not getting credit for it. Do you think it also may have the potential to be a plus to get away from some of
Oh,
these restrictions?
absolutely. It's going to be a double-edged sword thing. I mean, that's already happened. The copyright thing with what's the famous the name of the famous Japanese animation studio? Oh shoot, it's on the tip of my tongue. Ghibli, Studio Ghibli. That already happened with that artist. They
Yeah.
already remade all that stuff with AI, and that poor guy's rolling in his grave because like Japanese artisans, they take that to another level. Like
Yeah.
that's their soul, man.
Yeah.
That is their soul in that creation of theirs. And for whoever did that with AI to recreate that guy's artwork with AI, I mean, that's a crime against humanity for real. You don't even need to play a card game for that. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of good that comes out of that. And I think there's a lot of bad. And that's why I think right now, at least in the United States, we are probably already a year or two late on having some kind of digital Bill of Rights. We need like
Yeah.
digital laws for the
Yeah.
digital space because all kinds of bizarre shit's about to happen. I mean, we don't forget Black Mirror and Love, Death, and Robots. We won't need to watch that anymore. All you're going to need to do is just pay attention to real life because all kinds of weird stuff is going to happen. And, we're just terrible at this as human beings, but especially as Americans. I talked about before, we just embrace technology without ever considering the consequences. Like, forget the consequences. No, just use it, man. And I think now we are starting to feel the consequences a little bit because that's another thing, another aspect of this great revealing that people are waking up to. More and more people are talking about the state of the internet and the repercussions of too much screen time.
Mm.
And it's interesting because I think older people, older millennials and Gen Xers are important and interesting voices in this conversation because they know a time when this didn't exist. And even when the internet came on, when it was still cool,
Yeah.
say maybe pre-2015, when it wasn't totally monetized and corporatized yet and actually was used as a social lubricant to connect people in an authentic way and to make friends. And now that's all lost. But there's this oxymoronic quality to it now. We're all on these stupid Black Mirrors 24/7. We're more connected than ever, and we're more connected. We're connected to more people than ever. But it's all fake. It's all theater. It's all show and no substance. It's all spark and no bang. And so people are realizing that we're more lonely than ever, more disconnected than ever. Even though it seems that it's all here right in the palm of my hand. So I think that's kind of happening fast. That we're realizing that too much screen time and too much social media is turning us into really shitty human beings. And in order to fix that, we actually are going to have to get off social media and phones and from in front of the Black Mirror to be better human beings again.
Yeah, it's like so many of the skills atrophy. You
Yeah.
lose community. And if you look around, it seems to me that the loss of community, how can you have a functioning world without community? And
Yeah, and some of the YouTube comments about that are just fascinate me nowadays. Like people saying, "Oh, I walk around and everybody just looks dead. Nobody's engaged. There's no life. There's no vibrancy. People aren't enthusiastic. It's just like everybody's saying, it just sucks, man. You could just see it in people." And I'm like, wow, because I'm out of the country, so I don't know. I don't see it enough. I didn't really have time enough to see it when I was in the States for psychedelic science. I did a little bit in Denver. I did pick up on it a little bit because I pretty much think, being at the conference, we were in a bubble.
yeah.
And outside of that bubble, at least physically and geographically, the rest of downtown Denver didn't look that great. I saw a lot of people sleeping in doorways. I saw a fentanyl zombie once walking down the street 11 o'clock in the morning. That wasn't a sign of good times. 11 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, and there's a fentanyl zombie walking down the street in downtown Denver. That's not good. So, yeah, I mean, it's the old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. May you live in interesting times. And it's just like we're stepping from, 20th century to the 21st century, from one world and one planet to the other. And maybe we might be really close to that moment where the leading foot isn't on the new world yet. I mean, yet the back foot is stepped off the old world. Like we're kind of
Yeah.
suspended between the two in that liminal space.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely interesting, and it's imperative to try to find joy and try to find
Yeah.
connection, because without those things, you got
Yeah.
nothing, man.
Those are the things that are really going to ground us. Your family, your friends, being out in nature and plugging in somehow, dropping in somehow, having some kind of small spiritual practice, whether that's hiking in the woods, meditating, doing yoga, journaling, breath work, something, and float tanks, something, anything, just for 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. I think developing that connection to consciousness, to spirit, to something bigger than you are will help right and steady the ship as we go through these tempests. It's going to be wild.
Man, definitely gonna be wild. Adam Miezio, I love talking to you, man. I enjoy all of our conversations where we're going. I'm super stoked to have gotten to spend so much time with you at the Psychedelic Maps conference, and Global Psychedelic Week sounds amazing. But for people that are listening to our conversation and they want to reach out to you, maybe they want to be involved in Global Psychedelic Weeks, maybe they read some of your recent articles and all these new magazines that you seem to be writing and all of it, and maybe they want to reach out and talk to you themselves. Like, how do they get a hold of you?
Oh, geez, there's way too much going on here. LinkedIn is a great place. You can find me on LinkedIn. Message me there. You can find me at adammiezio.substack.com. You can find me there as well. Everybody check out Global Psychedelic Week. Come join us November 3rd through the 9th. It's nice because it's online. You can be anywhere in the world and join us. And then, I had an article come out not long ago in Fat Nugs magazine. I have another one coming out in Fat Nugs for their soon to be issued psychedelic edition. And then Psychedelic Pathways also had an article of my music, Mushrooms Make Music article in Psychedelic Pathways. So always keep an eye out for me in your psychedelic and cannabis related magazines and websites. So I think Substack, LinkedIn, Global Psychedelic Week, that covers the best bases where you can find me and connect.
Man, ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes. Check out Adam. He's an incredible thinker. He's really fun to talk to, and he cares deeply about where we're going in this world, and he's making a difference doing it, man. Thank you, Adam. Hang on briefly afterwards, but to everybody else in the sound of my voice, have a beautiful day. That's all we got. Aloha.
Stay awesome, everyone. Courage!